The Commanders are officially in their new era with the first full offseason with the new ownership, front office, and coaching staff. They finally have the QB they hope to be the franchise, and the Commanders seem to be going in the right place. Today, I'll talk about the disappointing 2023 season and how they should be able to bounce back after their interesting offseason. And there's been a lot of change, but let's talk about their team last year. They went 4-13, they got the second overall pick, they were 24th in total offense, 32nd in total defense. Wasn't great, right? You know, you paid some money on that defensive side, then you trade Chase Young, Montez Sweat, again, Jonathan Allen, and Deron Payne got some big money. You drafted Emmanuel Forbes to hopefully be that productive cornerback, but that just didn't happen, and he had a pretty bad rookie season, and now we're having these talks about, did you have this Justin Jefferson, Jalen Reagor type moment when Christian Gonzalez went right after him? Now, there's obviously so many years to come, and, maybe its coaching change could be for the best for Emmanuel Forbes. So we'll see with that, but let's talk about last year a little bit more. They had a terrible offensive line, the sacks after sacks after sacks, and yes, some of that was Sam Howell's fault, but this offensive line was not great at all, except Sam Cosmi, who absolutely had a breakout season and arguably is one of the best offensive guards in the NFL. Jahan Dotson had an unfortunate regression in terms of production. I don't think he necessarily had a bad season, and it doesn't help that Sam Howell got sacked 65 times, but there was times where he just wasn't making the catch when needed, and he wasn't necessarily getting covered, blanketed this whole time. I think he definitely had a solid, year of getting open and getting those opportunities, but it just didn't correlate to anything this year. And production-wise, and what many people were expecting this past year was not great at all when you talked about that offense. But Terry McLaurin had a pretty good season. Nothing great, but again, put in a really bad situation last year. Curtis Samuel had a pretty good season. Now he goes on. We'll talk about that a little later. Brian Robinson, has his first full year. Really takes the spot as the RB1 in my opinion last year, and then heading into this year again. We'll talk about that a little more when we talk about their off-season additions. Let's talk about this defense a little more that we kind of talked about earlier. This defense was bad. Horrendous. When you talk about the secondary, Emmanuel Forbes, Benjamin St-Juste wasn't great. Christian Holmes wasn't great when asked to play corner, right? Cam Curl obviously had a pretty good season. I think he had his moments where it wasn't great, and Kendall Fuller obviously doing a great job on the outside. Now he's heading to Miami. So, you had some quality players there. You had some pretty bad players. So again, we'll get to how they decided to go ahead and fix some of that up. Linebackers, again, wasn't great. Jamin Davis didn't have a great season. Don't get me started on Cody Barton, who was terrible in run defense. Wasn't the best coverage guy. He has some speed and athleticism to it, but he just struggles to use it to his advantage. And same thing with Jamin Davis. He kind of comes into the NFL and we're like, okay, he's a raw, athletic linebacker. Let him grow, but at the same time, let him attack. Let him just go for it. And sometimes that hasn't really worked out, and I don't think he's really been given the opportunity like that. And I think with, again, we'll talk about this a little later, Dan Quinn's defense, he could be, used a little bit differently. Maybe he's getting a little bit more times to pin his ears back. But again, we'll get to that. You traded Montez Sweat, you traded Chase Young, you really reset at the edge position. You got your second round pick, you got your third round pick from the 49ers and Bears respectively. And it was kind of a surprise that both of them got traded. I would have kept Montez Sweat, but I understand that second round pick was definitely valuable. And we'll talk about that when we get to the draft, because I think they had a pretty good draft. But again, you make those moves. The edge rushers weren't great. I like KJ Henry. I think he's a solid complementary edge guy. You had Casey Toohill that unfortunately didn't really stand out as he kind of went into a more starting role, even though he's a pretty good guy coming off the bench. And you had some other guys that weren't great. And then Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne regressed. I don't think it was as bad as many people put it out to be, but it wasn't great. And you just paid Deron Payne the offseason before. You paid Jonathan Allen a few offseasons before. So there's a lot of money going to those two guys in the middle of the defensive line. You want to see them play a little better. You want to see them get back to the way that they were a few years ago, and I think they definitely will. But when we talk about the 2023 and where everything kind of went wrong, that was also a big part of it. So now we head into 2024 with the Washington Commanders. So they go ahead, they kind of just clear house, kind of, almost, in the offseason when it comes to the front office. They go ahead, they hire Adam Peters, who's formerly for the 49ers, as their GM. He brings in some guys, Rick Spielman, the Golden State Warriors longtime GM, but I can't remember his name, but he comes in and helped define that head coach and find some other staff members. They settle on Dan Quinn. You talk about this Ben Johnson debacle where, they were flying to Detroit and then he pulls out of the interview, and now you're just kind of sitting there like, did the Commanders just get screwed here? And I think it's very well possible, and I'm leaning towards yes. I think they were zeroing in on Ben Johnson being that guy. He, backs out. And Dan Quinn wasn't necessarily my first option. I really liked Anthony Weaver from the Ravens, who, when you talk about these coaches that were head coaches before and then they come back, it's not a great hit rate unless they are top of the line head coaches. And Dan Quinn wasn't really that for Atlanta. Obviously, a great defensive coordinator for Dallas, and we saw that the past few years. We're just going to see if that can translate now back to as a head coach, right? And I think the defense should, stay the course. Now, I'm not saying Dallas's or Commanders' defense is just as good as the Cowboys' defense. It's not, but we should see similar things, and hopefully that really helps the Commanders next year. And, but I liked Anthony Weaver. I liked the defense. I liked he had a little bit, he wasn't completely away from the offensive side as well. He had some impacts on that offensive side when it comes to the Ravens, just a little bit. So I think that definitely kind of drew me towards that. But Dan Quinn's now the head coach. They bring in Cliff Kingsbury as the offensive coordinator. So we'll see how that goes with the new, team, this new offense, this new quarterback that we'll get to. So yeah, and they have Joe Witt as defense coordinator, who will be calling plays. But again, Joe Witt, Dan Quinn, seems very similar, so I don't think that really changes much. So we talk about this offseason. We talk about free agency. Some of the guys they lost Sam Howell, Jacoby Brissett. They traded Sam Howell to the Seahawks, let Jacoby Brissett go in free agency. He went back to New England. Antonio Gibson, he had a great rookie season, then kind of falling off that. He goes to New England as well. Curtis Samuel, they don't re-sign him. He goes to Buffalo. Definitely going to get a good opportunity there. Up north, Logan Thomas, Charles Leno, the left tackle, who wasn't too bad for him in the later stages of his career. Cody Barton, Kendall Fuller, again, one of the better, more stable guys in the secondary in this whole defense. He goes to Miami. Cam Curl, like I mentioned earlier. So again, big overhaul, big guy. Many people leaving and not being re-signed, not being they really changed up this entire roster, and we see that in free agency as well as we look at the guys they brought in: Dorrance Armstrong, Dante Fowler, Clelin Ferrell. When you talk about those edge rushers getting a rotation in, and obviously I don't think they're necessarily as good as Montez Sweat, or the Chase Young kind of tandem, but it's quality guys that you're going to see going in and out, and I like Dorrance Armstrong. Obviously, connections to Cowboys with Dan Quinn over the past few years, right? They bring in Dante Fowler, right? Tyler Biadasz, to that offensive line. He's going to be the center there. And it's Nick Allegretti, Chiefs guard. He'll get a chance to start there. Zach Ertz, they brought in earlier in this offseason to be a veteran tight end. They also brought in Austin Eckler as a nice receiving back. He'll get lots of those chances on third downs, catching the ball, making something happen after the catch. And, I think we'll talk about it a little bit more, but I don't think he'll be their RB1 as maybe some people see that. And Frankie Louvu and Bobby Wagner are absolutely rehauling this linebacker class, this linebacker core, right? And I'm super excited. Now you talk about the draft. You bring in Jaden Daniels with the second overall pick, quarterback. I'll be honest, I like Drake May a little bit more, right? But I wasn't too far off on Jaden Daniels. I think that was a great pick. You get your quarterback. You can't be too mad at that, right? So you have that. In the second round, you make some moves. But second round pick, you go ahead and you get Jerzon Newton. That's the Jerzon Newton, defensive tackle from Illinois, who absolutely fell. I thought he was a lock to go in the first round. He falls, and yes, he's an interior defensive lineman, and you have Jonathan Allen, you have Daron Payne, but I think that gives you an opportunity to let go of Jonathan Allen in a few years. But also, that's a guy you can play with, Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne, on the field at one time. You can put him on the edge a little bit now, or a little bit wider, I would say. Now, not fully on the edge. You're not going to get, most of the time you're not going to get him on the outside of the tackle or even tight end. but I think that's a guy that you can definitely put on the field. Of all three of them, that's a guy you could have in rotation. I understand there's a little bit of an injury history that, coming up, but I think he'll be fine. And you talk about some other, the two other second-round picks they made. They went ahead. They made a trade to the Eagles. They traded down. They got Mikey Sainter still. We want to talk about those cornerbacks. A really good kind of slot nickel cornerback, right? He's feisty. He's going to play on the inside. Not really going to play on the outside as much, but you can play him on the outside if need be. But definitely a guy that you really want kind of roaming the middle of the field as a nickel guy there. And Mikey Sainter still. You get Ben Sinnott as well, or Ben Sinnott, I'm not too sure still. You get a nice tight end that you can really pair up with Zach Ertz. A kind of jack-of-all-trades type of tight end, athletic. He's, going to be able to do some things after the catch as well, which I think is going to be really nice. I think Kyle Juszczyk, even though I think he's definitely different, I think he's more of a true tight end than a fullback, but you'll see him in packages and plays like a Kyle Juszczyk. Definitely. You head into the third round. You go ahead. You draft Brandon Coleman, who is looking to start at left tackle. I was a little disappointed with that pick. I'm not, I didn't know too much about him, so I wasn't going to say he was a bad pick, or, whatever. But from the other tackles I did see, I did like a lot of other guys that I'm so surprised they didn't trade back up into the first round for these tackles, because the first kind of tier of tackles, the first few tiers of tackles really went in the first round. And once you got those guys going, they just didn't stop. So they got Brandon Coleman in the third round. They ended the third round with the last pick. They got Luke McCaffrey, Christian McCaffrey's brother, who goes ahead and can slot kind of into that wide receiver 3 role kind of already, maybe into the slot a little bit. But you go ahead. I think there's some other receivers ahead of him, but I think you're getting a guy who's feisty, got some great hands, and I think that can definitely be a playmaker there in that offense. Talk about some of the other guys. I think the main other guy, we talk about Jordan McGee. You got some other guys later in the draft, but they're probably just more depth pieces, special teams players if they do make the team right now. But Jordan McGee probably won't start, linebacker from Temple, but he's definitely a guy that you want to have Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu really spend all their time together in practice with, right? You want him in his ear, right? And definitely a fast and physical linebacker who hopefully can take all he can and soak it up from Frankie Louvu and also Bobby Wagner, who I think really just revamps this linebacker core. And so now we just talk about the offense, what we expect, and what are the storylines of this 2024 season for the Washington Commanders, right? So Jaden Daniels. How does Jaden Daniels look? What's the stat line you want to see from him when you're talking about just pure stats? But obviously you want to see growth. You want to see growth from his final year in college to the NFL, right? There's obviously going to be bumps and bruises and nicks and knacks on the way as he's a rookie, and every rookie goes through it, right? And he's not in a bad situation. I think the offensive line could be better, but I feel like we've seen worse things with the offensive line. We've seen definitely worse receiving cores, playmakers around him. We saw that obviously last year with Bryce Young. That was not great, but you get Terry McLaurin, one of the better receivers in the NFL. Hopefully Jahan Dotson. So we kind of have all that. Ben Sinnott, Zach Ertz, Luke McCaffrey, maybe Brandon Ayuk. I don't know. I just don't see Brandon Ayuk getting traded this offseason. I think he'll stay with the 49ers. I think he'll be playing in a 49ers uniform. But if that opportunity does come next offseason, if there's no contract to be signed yet for the 49ers and Brandon Ayuk, I definitely see the Commanders getting in the trade market for Brandon Ayuk. Right? Jaden Daniels, Brandon Ayuk, absolutely best friends, played together early on at their days at ASU, and overall they are just best friends in their personal lives. So we'll see about that. That offensive line is going to be a big question, right? I think it's better. Still don't think it's great, but you have Tyler Biadasz at the center. You're hoping that Brandon Coleman could be the left tackle that you need. That's one of the biggest picks of this draft for the Commanders. If that hits and he turns out to be a solid left tackle that you can trust, I'm not asking him to be a Trent Williams. I'm not asking him to be an all-pro. But if he can turn into a pretty good, not really going to worry about him left tackle, maybe even a Pro Bowl left tackle, you're really working well there with this pick. And this pick means so much right now for the Commanders because they didn't make too many other moves at offensive line other than in the draft. with Tyler Biadasz, and then obviously Nick Allegretti, and you got some other guys, Sam Cosmi, right? He'll get the start there. We'll see who starts at right tackle. That's a battle there. Left guard too. So there's position battles all over the place, in my opinion, other than the right guard spot. And that's Sam Cosmi's job. Don't got to worry about it, right? I doubt they move him back to right tackle because he's been playing so well at right guard. If you get a Pro Bowl type caliber right guard, you take the Pro Bowl caliber right guard. You're getting a really good guard if he's Pro Bowl caliber. If your offensive lineman is Pro Bowl caliber, you're good. That's really all you need. You don't need a Hall of Famer, Pro Bowl, or All-Pro guy, at every single position. So that's kind of where I see that with that offensive line. You really hope to see the Jahan Dotson resurgence, and I definitely think that's possible. And then just overall, this Cliff Kingsbury offense, as it didn't look great in Arizona, but then you go to USC, and they're doing everything great with Caleb Williams. So hopefully now that he's mainly focused on the offense, you see a bit of difference, and you see a good offense that can thrive around Jaden Daniels in this Commanders offense. So that's a big question when you talk about that offense. When you go to the defensive side of the ball, right? Dan Quinn, how's his defense going to look? Is it going to look similar to what we saw in Dallas? Again, not going to say that they're just going to all of a sudden be as good as Dallas's defense, but we want to see similarities, and hopefully guys like Doran Armstrong, Dante Fowler can take what they know from this defense, put it onto the other guys. I also forgot to mention they added Jeremy Chin as kind of a safety linebacker hybrid guy, so he's definitely going to be utilized in that area as well with this defense. And again, like a lot of change at the defensive line, especially that linebacker core is completely been rebranded. But you have some quality guys as well, some younger guys that you really want to see develop. KJ Henry, of course, Quan Martin, kind of nickel safety guy who I think very well could move into that true free safety role. Derek Forrest on that strong safety kind of a role. And you really want to see Emmanuel Forbes take a big step, a big jump. Right, and hopefully that helps, and Dan Quinn can really get through to him, and you're looking at hopefully a starting cornerback there in Emmanuel Forbes, because again, we saw what he can do in college. He is very productive when he was productive when we talked about being a ball hawk in a way when you talk about the interceptions, but again, not all of it was just him. He was a lot of time in the right place, right time type of situation. So we'll see there what happens with the Washington Commanders. But, Washington Commanders could definitely be a sneaky team. I don't expect them to make the playoffs, but they definitely could. For a floor record, I have them going 5-12. For a ceiling, 11-6. I think they go 7-10 though here in the NFL. Ultimately, I love the direction that the Washington Commanders are heading. This won't be a fast rebuild. Again, you're gonna have to take some time, but I think they've really built this front office, this ownership and coaching staff has really built a good foundation for this rebuild with, the new defensive players they brought in, the veterans, the new rookies they brought in. Obviously, now you have your franchise quarterback that you drafted the second overall pick with, and that you have true intentions of starting right away and having him take the reins and hopefully take this team back to the Super Bowl. But that's gonna be a while away. But as of right now, all you can ask is progression from this team as a whole. I think this team is very different in mentality, from last year and even years before. I think you got really good guys that can come in and have a good presence in this locker room from young to old. So I think the Commanders are heading in the right direction. Again, it won't be fast. I don't expect them to, people put the Texans CJ Stroud label on them, and I get it. There is similar comparisons to what CJ Stroud and the Texans did last year, but I'm not going to do that. I don't think they're going to have this big jump and expect them to make the playoffs and have a chance maybe to even go to the Super Bowl if everything went right. So that's kind of where I stand there with the Commanders. What are you guys' thoughts? What are you guys' thoughts on their record this year? Could they make the playoffs? Could they surprise some teams? And what do you think about Jaden Daniels? Do you think this is the quarterback for them? So let me know. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.